report.
Tonight, Chris Bowen's bizarre climate speech today. Why is this man telling such falsehoods? Another big scandal with Victoria's Labor government. Or is it? Really? Also tonight, Anthony Albanese insults Japan all over again. Do we blame that on the young women he's trying to impress? And plenty more, including Rowan Dean. But first, we now don't just have Islamist terrorism. We also have our first case of left-wing terrorism. There's a culture of violence growing in Australia, and I'm going to show you a video about that latest terrorism that should tell you of a very dangerous shift in the culture of the left. Now, before that, though, let me show you how we're building up to this bonfire and why a lot of people who read this story today, students to skip class for anti-Pauline Hanson rally, they won't realise that this isn't just the case of silly children who at least meant well. That protest next week will actually be of students around Australia outraged by the supposed threat of Pauline Hanson. Students say no to Hanson, as the protest poster says. Say no to racism. Stand up against the far right. Those students won't know that the real danger is them, or rather the extremists manipulating them, extremists with violence on their mind. Let's have another look at the poster because it gives a clue here, admitting that this protest is actually organised by the Education Officer of the National Union of Students, just under the, next to the Hanson word there. Now that clarifies things, because that Education Officer is Yasmin Johnson, and she is a member of the Socialist Alternative, a hardline Marxist group opposed to our democracy. And no, this organisation does not mean well at all. I actually talked about it early this week, how one of the Socialist Alternative's many front groups, the Campaign Against Racism and Fascism, organised a protest in Melbourne last October where police were pelted with rocks. And that violence sure wasn't a coincidence.
Weeks earlier, the Campaign Against Racism and Fascism group held a meeting at the University of Melbourne. Protesters were told to be militant and be aggressive. A strategy on a slideshow suggested to use bricks to throw at a cop.
Now, this coalition against racism and fascism, and to repeat, it is a Socialist Alternative front, was also behind the angry protests against Hanson in Melbourne last Monday. That's because its declared strategy is to fight the far right, and I quote, directly confront them in the street, which to me sounds like a clear threat of physical violence, which is why Pauline Hanson was forced to scrap her initial plan to announce the Victorian election candidates on the steps of Parliament House. She had to move to an indoor venue that could be heavily protected by police. But back to that Yasmin Johnson, the organiser of this student protest against Hanson. She sure has absorbed the Socialist Alternative teachings. I last saw her giving evidence last month at the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism, and it was chilling. She said her Jewish family had all but been eliminated in the Holocaust, and declared that violence was bad, so far, promising. But shame on her. Violence was bad unless it was against Israel, the Jewish homeland.
But violence is okay if it's perpetrated against Israel. Is that right?
I think the resistance of people against colonisation has always involved elements of both mass non-violence and also violent resistance.
In fact, as Johnson went on, it turned out that violence was actually good if used by anyone she deemed oppressed.
I don't hold movements for the justice of the oppressed to a standard that says there can never be any violence.
What's more, check out her answer when she was asked, well, what about the Hamas terrorist group, which started this latest war with Israel? Started, as you know, by slaughtering 1,200 Israelis, most of them civilians, raping women, beheading men, murdering even children, burning their homes. Johnson just dodged.
I'm not a political supporter of Hamas, but nor am I here to condemn the actions of people who have been placed in a concentration camp by Israel for decades.
Concentration camps, for heaven's sake. Not here to condemn Hamas. And that's the organiser now of this protest against Hansen. Now, I know excuses and all that. The young can be stupid and callous, as you might look back on that years from now and feel utterly ashamed. But someone is teaching her this stuff. And, separate to her specifically, someone else has convinced all these protesting school children of lies like, Israel is some satanic country committing genocide and imposing an apartheid. I've been there, this complete rubbish. But what do you think happens if we teach children for years now that Israel's a monster, Australia's genocidal too, the US is satanic? Don't you think some people are going to conclude that against that kind of evil, oh yes, violence is indeed excusable? Let's go. Because rhetoric has its consequences. And we've seen that now, not just with the threats against Hansen, those attacks on police last year. Another example, the terrorist attack on Lovett Technologies. Now, in July last year, activists attacked this defence manufacturer in Melbourne. It makes parts for the F-35 jet fighter, torching 3 cars there. A counter-terror team from Victoria Police, the Australian Federal Police and ASIO this week said they were now investigating this as an act of terrorism, potentially orchestrated by far-left extremists with anarchist and revolutionary ideologies. Well, colour me not surprised, because you just look at the video put out by people claiming responsibility for that arson attack. A video of a masked individual with an Aboriginal Palestinian flag and wearing a Torres Strait Island badge, who wrapped up all these revolutionary Marxist battle cries, the causes du jour, all these people, all these oppressed peoples that they want to fight for, into one threat of violence.
Consider this a warning. After 21 months of an accelerated genocide against the Palestinian people by the illegitimate Zionist entity, 8 decades of American warmongering and imperialism, 2.5 centuries of the most violent colonial oppression, ethnic cleansing, and murder of Aboriginal peoples across so-called Australia, Lovett Technologies has chosen its place at the intersection of these catastrophes. Every worker in this supply chain is complicit. For the past few months we have been closely watching you. We have your addresses.
And that person ended with a cry of death to Australia, death to America. I don't know if the socialist alternative, I wouldn't be surprised if he's absorbed their teachings. I mean, note again all those symbols he showed of the alleged oppressed people, not just Palestinians, Aborigines, Torres Strait Islanders. Is violence in their cause now also justified?
This is a war!
Now, look, I get it. You've got so many unemployable graduates, So imagine someone with a useless degree in post-colonial studies or gender studies or whatever, living in some grubby Northcote share house, feeling underappreciated by this world that doesn't appreciate their talent. It must be so exciting to just put on a mask and scare people like some kind of masked avenger, a Spider-Man of the left. Finally, you've got power. And your cause is so good, your enemies are so horrible, that the more violent you are, the more noble you are. And that is how monsters are made. Like the Stalinists, who were executing hundreds of thousands of people, not because the Stalinists were evil, of course. They were doing it because, to save society's good health. It was a hygiene measure. Now, here are the numbers of these violence-excusing socialists, Marxists really. They're growing, and they are the real danger. And this is the price I think we've got to pay for academics and politicians for years preaching this bizarre self-hatred of the West, and especially of its great exemplars of the West's freedoms, starting with Israel. The Albanese government, meanwhile, is choking under the pressure of Pauline Hanson, and today, what an embarrassment. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke. He's the man now most likely to replace Anthony Albanese as Prime Minister one day. I think, anyway. And he was going to make a big speech at the National Press Club tomorrow to show he's really going to slash immigration. I mean, look what the polls are saying. People want it. And already I'm thinking, hey, what's taking you? Because the immigration intake is still way too high. The promised cuts you keep making turn out less every year than the government, was planning. But this time, Burke, you got to believe the sort of leaks, the briefings that were being given. Oh, he was going to go in really hard. No one missed the nice guy. Instead, tougher family visa rules, reportedly, fewer rights for asylum seekers to work and appeal against decisions to kick them out, and more hard man stuff, except when Burke, who's of the Labor right, presented his plan to Cabinet, which is dominated by the Labor left, last Monday. Wow, big pushback, alarm, raised voices, we're told. Labor being tough on immigration, are we really Pauline Hanson? Although Hanson would, of course, be a lot tougher than Burke was planning. But anyway, that is why Tony Burke had to cancel his big speech tomorrow. Said his plans weren't ready, which is one way of putting it. Anthony Albanese was on holiday, so that Monday meeting was in fact chaired instead by Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, who today pretended, oh no, all was sweet. Arguments? I mean, what arguments?
Has there been disagreements about the policy?
No, we've been working through the policy. There's been a whole lot of iterations of what we've done in the space of immigration.
The leaks say different. And peace and harmony was not quite what Chris Bone was hinting at either.
As every journalist in Australia knows, you've never heard me comment on a cabinet discussion in private or in public. Many of you have tried, none of you have succeeded, and you're not succeeding today.
Well, how far should migration norms extend?
Tony Burke will provide further updates.
Joining me is the panel, former Liberal Senator Holly Hughes, now with One Nation, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Michael, what does all that tell you?
Well, it tells me that the left is flexing its muscles. You got to remember here, by the way, if Tony Burke is proposing to do what has been leaked, clearly I support that. I mean, it should have been done a long time ago, and even more should be done. So, I mean, the policy direction's the right direction. But we've got to remember, you've got a Prime Minister that, was a keen supporter of Labor for refugees. He and Wong and others embarrassed Bill Shorten when he tried to do the turnbacks and support Tony Abbott's policy in 2015. So it doesn't surprise me at all that the left, and I wouldn't be surprised the Prime Minister is also behind this, has tried to torpedo even this moderate policy in the right direction. And as you rightly said, Andrew, the immigration levels are too high. Everybody knows that. The quality of the immigration is a question. We had those revelations about skilled migration, including family members and everybody else, and the actual amount of skilled tradesmen we get is very low. So, look, this is a clear case of the left flexing its muscles, and I wouldn't be surprised the Prime Minister's behind it.
Holly Hughes?
Oh, those poor darlings, all are scared from One Nation and those big, scary backpackers that they're going to stop coming to the country. We all know that that's not the issue with migration. It's not the number of backpackers. But even their suggestion that they're going to somehow toughen up asylum seekers and being able to work. I was actually having a discussion this morning with someone who's just got back from the UK, and they were pointing out the work restrictions actually are leading to rises in crime because people are sitting around all day unable to work. And if we're bringing these people in, they should be skilled migrants for a start. I'm just surprised Tony Burke had the guts to cancel it up front. I thought he might have just pulled a sickie tomorrow, and that's why he couldn't go ahead with it. But, this is just totally unbelievable that Labor would ever get serious about cracking down on immigration. It's their bread and butter. We see with the citizenship ceremonies being held with the Electoral Commission officials at the back of the room to make sure they're all signed up to vote as soon as is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, no one believes them. No one believes that Labor wants to do anything about this. And I guess, when the left tell you who they really are, you should listen.
Well, it just also suggests that whatever Tony Burke might promise before an election, the Labor Party might roll back after it. The collective might swallow it up. But Michael, for Tony Burke, right, this is the man who famously let in Palestinians from terrorist-run Gaza. 1 in 3 voters in his seat are Muslim. He even greeted, by the way, those Palestinians at the airport. To now want to go tough on immigration, does that confirm that he does have very strong leadership ambitions?
I don't think that's what it's about, Andrew. I think this is a strategic decision. It has to do with one nation. I totally agree with that analysis. They're worried about some of those outer suburban seats and the rural seats, particularly the one up here in Hunter. And I think they're seeking to respond in the mildest way they can that heads towards that direction to try and take some wind out of the sails of one nation. I think that's what it's all about. The dumb left, of course, based in the inner city, doesn't want a bar of this, even if it costs them seats in the outer suburbs of Sydney. So that's what I think it's about. Tony Burke hasn't changed his spots.
Hey, Holly, in Victoria, a big media story about a Labor scandal that, to be honest, when I looked closer into it, didn't amount to much, not to me. Victoria's anti-corruption watchdog, IBAC, has put out a report on a wage deal and control of volunteer firefighters. This deal that former Premier Daniel Andrews made with the hard-left leadership of the Firefighters Union. And it was made behind the back of the minister supposedly in charge, who's hard against it and quit in protest. Have a look.
We did find that he authorised the then Special Minister for State, Mr Gavin Jennings, with the assistance of the Deputy Secretary of Department of Premier and Cabinet, to conduct an undisclosed backroom deal with the Secretary of the United Firefighters Union, Mr Peter Marshall. And their actions in conducting this deal was contrary to government policy procedures, their respective codes of conduct, conventions. And that, as you said, Mr Marshall was able to use that as leverage.
Now, Holly, I agree, it's typical Dan Andrews thuggery, but I mean, am I shocked that a Premier makes the big call? It was clear at the time that he was doing it. And the bottom line is that this report admitted it could find no corruption, no evidence of wild claims of the Firefighters Union boss, Peter Marshall, had dirt on the Premier was blackmailing him, which Daniel Andrews put out a statement saying exactly the same. I mean, when the only recommendations that come out of this 8-year report is that politicians and staff get training on proper behaviour, it seems to me a case of more thunder than rain.
Well, I mean, honestly, did anyone expect anything different? It was an inquiry put together by the Dan Andrews government. It took 8 years for it to come out. IBAC has zero teeth. We've got an ICAC inquiry going on in New South Wales at the moment. It has considerable more power than IBAC does. But I mean, it is outrageous that this report has taken 8 years. But of course, Ben Carroll, you can imagine, will not take no action. And it's only the late Jane Garrett, who was the only one that seems to have had any integrity in the Andrews government, who actually resigned from cabinet over this while Ben Carroll was still sitting around the cabinet table. So I think if Victoria wants to get serious about cleaning itself up, it does need an anti-corruption body that actually has some teeth, maybe not as many as ICAC, which can sometimes be seen to overstep the mark, but certainly this is just a ridiculous waste of time, effort and money on everyone's behalf to really not show anything.
Michael Costa, a Premier, goes behind the relevant minister's back to make a deal. Should you colour me shocked and horrified?
Well, I think the real issue is the one about standards for corruption. I mean, look, people in New South Wales have been found guilty of corruption for less than that, for moving a staffer in one case from one office to the Parliament House. So you've got different standards across the Commonwealth, and I think it makes a mockery of the whole definition of corruption. In Victoria, of course, you've got to have an indictable offence. In New South Wales, you don't have to have that. And some of the activities in New South Wales that people have been found corrupt for would be seen as legitimate politics in Victoria and federally. So there's a real problem with these definitions, and people need to get to the bottom of a consistent, uniform system, or else it's going to be held up to mockery.
So if you want to be corrupt, do it in Victoria.
Michael Costa, Holly Hughes, thank you very much to you both. After the break, Chris Bowen's bizarre climate speech today. I'll fact check that. As I said, Tony Burke cancelled his National Press Club speech tomorrow to save himself embarrassment. If only Energy Minister Chris Bowen had made the same call with his speech there today. Now, Bowen planned to unveil more changes to try to reach his now hopeless target of generating 82% of our electricity by renewable energy by 2030. But he found it impossible to actually promise now to make that deadline.
Will you get to 82%?
Oh, I think we can. I think we can. You know,
can rather than will?
Well, if we get to 82% in 2031 and not 2030, that's still a very good thing.
In fact, Bowen implied that this massive push towards net zero, costing tens of billions, could make little difference to the world's climate.
As our opponents like to parrot, we are about 1% of global emissions.
Now, let me correct you, Chris. We're about 1% of human emissions, yes, but about 0.05% of total emissions when you add natural ones. In other words, so little that nothing we do here could make any difference to the climate that anyone could measure. But Bowen wasn't finished fantasising. He said he'd actually seen this climate crisis drowning Tuvalu.
I've stood at the most narrow point of Tuvalu and seen the impact of rising seas.
Another correction, Chris. The last big study of Tuvalu by top sea-level experts at Auckland University in 2018 found Tuvalu had actually grown, not drowned, grown by 2.9% in the 4 decades to 2014. And there was this reference to the Iran war.
Good climate policy is good energy security policy as well. Building renewables more into your household, in your country, improves your energy security. The sun can't be blockaded. The wind can't be sanctioned.
Come on, Chris. That blockade hurt us, in fact, mostly by stopping petrol and diesel. And solar power can't replace that. And if we actually extracted more of our own coal, used our uranium, got more gas out of the ground, no blockade would stop that either. Joining me is Rowan Dean, Editor-in-Chief of The Spectator Australia, host of Outsiders every Sunday at 9 a.m. and host of his own show on Fridays at 7 p.m. Rowan, please, your reaction to Chris Bowen's speech today.
Well, it was rather sad. It was the incredible shrinking vision of Chris Bowen. If you remember, we were originally going to be a global renewables energy superpower. That was the vision of Chris Bowen back 3 or 4 years ago. And this involved us setting the agenda for the world on how renewables, we would be the superpower, they'd all be coming to us. And that kind of vision didn't quite work out, and we swapped to the green hydrogen vision. This is when we were going to invent a magical new form of electricity, just add water, and you've got abundance of green hydrogen. We were setting up green hydrogen hubs left, right, and centre. They all floundered, so the vision shrunk even smaller. We were going to have floating windmills out at sea, magical stuff, fantastic. They didn't work, and the investors all pulled out, and the dolphins and the whale watchers weren't too happy either. So that vision shrunk down. So we had one point we're all going to save $275 electricity every year or whatever it was. That all got scrapped. We're now down to begging, or rather bribing, farmers and a few warehouses out in Fishwick or wherever to stick some solar panels on the roof. That's what the vision has come down to. The vision now is, please put a battery in your backyard or your garage. We'll pay for it. Please put some solar panels on your roof or on your back of the shed, and we'll pay for it. This is where we're at. It is so pathetic. And I didn't think the press club did a brilliant job actually of holding him to account, as they like to say. They kind of let him get away with, as you said, all these various claims about this, that, and the other. The reality is our prosperity, our economy entirely relies on cheap, abundant energy going into the future, particularly with AI. And all we've got is more of the same stuff, more solar panels, more this, and demonizing coal. We've got more of the demonizing coal routine, which is kind of pathetic, seeing as they've let the entire industry go to the ground. around. But we did get, Andrew, there is some good news. I'm not being entirely facetious here. We did get a duck curve. Now, I always get excited when politicians start talking about a curve. Paul Keating used to talk about a J curve or something or other, or a dead cat bounce. So when socialists tell you that they've got a curve, sit up and pay attention. Michael Mann had his hockey stick curve, J curve, whatever, to describe things. It always means things aren't working out and things aren't, the stats aren't going the right way. Chris Bowen introduced the duck curve, which does something like this or something. He waved his hands around a bit. But to me, what he was really saying was, if it walks like a communist central command plan and it quacks like a communist central command plan, it is a communist central command plan. And that's what we have now in Australia, a central economy relying on more and more taxpayer subsidies going in to prop up these weird targets, 82%, 81% by this year or that year, which mean nothing anyway, because the vision of what we were supposed to be, what we were promised, has shrunk to a little outcrop on Tuvalu, where Chris Bowen has stood there. He's like Guterres. Remember when Antonio
He stood
rolled
like
up his
Stout
sleeve?
Cortez, he was.
Right.
Stout Cortez.
Bowen found a little outcrop of rocks, and
but mate,
no one else had seen it.
You're wrong. Give him credit. I don't think you've given enough credit, because there he was, right? The science, as you've reported it too, the science says Tuvalu's actually growing. But who needs science when you got Chris Bowen's magic eyeballs that just by standing on the beach, he can tell you it's been shrinking, it's gone away, and it's all because of global warming. I mean, seriously, mate. But I do want to give him a little bit of credit, Rowan, here, and I think you might agree with me, for at least today agreeing to the blinding obvious. It is 2.5 weeks since I reported that vile ABC clip, which you've talked about too on your show. A clip, fantasising about sodomising billionaire Gina Reinhart, mincing her guts to a paste. The ABC still refuses to say sorry, but Chris Bowen today became the 5th frontbencher of the Labor right to condemn it. Here he is.
I haven't seen the clip that you're referring to. It's not a show that I watch. But I've read the reports, and if the reports I've read are right, which I assume they are, then it is not appropriate. It should not have aired. And the ABC should take appropriate action. But, no Australian, even an Australian I profoundly disagree with, like Mrs Reinhart, should be subject to that sort of commentary. I would expect an apology.
Now, Rowan, I should note that no ministers from the Labor left, which is Anthony Albanese's faction, have said the same. That's ridiculous. 5 ministers, though, of frontbenchers of the right have. But the ABC still, after 2.5 weeks, won't say sorry. What does it say about what's necessary over there?
What it says is the opinion polls clearly show, and well done to you, Andrew, for originally bringing that to light, that disgusting clip. What the opinion polls are clearly showing Labor is that people are revolted by it. Nobody can believe that the ABC could be so despicable, so depraved, so obscene. Our politicians aren't stupid. They read the opinion polls, and they know full well that to do anything other than condemn it is a failure, a big fail. And the fact that Bowen and Miles and others of the so-called right of the Labor Party are jumping on this, but at the same time saying they haven't actually seen it, because where did they see it? Did they originally see it on the ABC and not say anything? Or did they, heaven forbid, see it on Andrew Bolt's show? Heaven forbid, no, we can't have that. So they're all pretending they haven't seen it, which of course they've all seen it. You'd have to be blind Freddy not to have seen that clip by now, and largely thanks to this network. The reality is that it is so disgusting and so depraved. It has shocked most Australians. I've overheard people in cafes talking about it, sickened by it. This is, this can do to Labor, or should do to Labor, what the entire Brittany Higgins, et cetera, did to the Liberal Party. This shows that the Labor Party are disgusting when it comes to genuinely caring about women. That's what it shows. The fact that they've equivocated, and even Bowen equivocated slightly, saying, "Oh, well, yeah,
he did. It took him. No, he did. But I have to say, for the ABC, after 2.5 weeks, still to refuse to apologise, suggests it's a deliberate decision by someone in the organisation, very senior, and if that's their call, they have no right to keep their job. They should be fired. after the 2.5 weeks. It's not a momentary mistake. 2.5 weeks of deep thought. They haven't apologised. Out. Rowan Dean, thank you so much for your time. After the break, Anthony Albanese insults Japan yet again. And I just wonder, hear me out, is he getting distracted by women he's trying to impress? An astonishing revelation today. The background, Anthony Albanese seems to have gone out of his way to insult Japan with some amazing sexism and boorishness. And I've got to ask, his weakness for a pretty young woman, is that the problem here? Just asking. I'll show you, you be the judge. I've talked before how when Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi came to Australia in May and gave Albanese a gift of a crown melon. By the way, that's a very ceremonial present in Japan. You know, you give it to the emperor, for instance. Albanese on a podcast turned that gesture into a sniggering joke at Takaichi's expense, complete with hands juggling over the breast area, which seemed to me part of an attempt to impress a good-looking young woman.
I'll tell you something I got recently here that was pretty strange but ended up being quite good.
Yeah.
Was a melon. The Japanese Prime Minister brought a melon.
How did he get that through customs?
It's a royal melon.
Oh, she smuggled. It was a she.
She?
Did she smuggle it?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm expecting.
Got a couple of melons.
She brought two.
She brought two, as you do.
She just came in looking like Pamela Anderson.
She brought two.
That was just totally bizarre and low rent, which a Japanese journalist in the Japan Times described, as I said last night, as a joke that was beneath Albanese and beneath Australia. But I've also mentioned that Albanese also insulted Japan by skipping a dinner at Parliament House last month to mark the 50th anniversary of the Australia-Japan Friendship and Cooperation Treaty. Japan even sent its foreign minister there, so where was Albanese? Well, today the Australian reports that he was in another room in the same Parliament House for a Spotify event, for an event for the music streaming service. And we all know that Albanese loves this music. There he posed next to a Spotify starlet, you know, and I guess that too was part of his love of music. Joining me earlier is Mike Newman, commentator, corporate advisor and former New South Wales Senior Trader Commissioner to Japan and Korea. And this is a man who's lived for many years in Japan. Mike Newman, thank you so much for your time. Anthony Albanese has insulted Japan and its Prime Minister in two ways. I'll get to the melons in a second. But skipping a dinner at Parliament House to mark the 50th anniversary of the Australia-Japan Friendship and Cooperation Treaty. I know you were there. You said at the time, where's Albanese? Well, we now know where he was. He was in another room in Parliament for a Spotify event and to meet a Spotify starlet. What does that say to you?
Well, it's a question of priorities, Andrew. I mean, you would have thought that the 50th anniversary of one of our most important trading partners, and not only trading, very strategic in a defence sense as well, to think that substituting one for another. Now, he could have attended the Spotify event, but at the same time, what he should have done is shown himself at the 50th anniversary of the Nara Treaty, which would have been far more a value-added process. But what I do think is happening here is he's showing just how tin-eared he is towards the Japanese relationship, and the Spotify revelations have only added to the insult that's already there.
I would have thought so too. It's quite extraordinary. Now, to the melons joke, you did warn some weeks ago that this joke at the Japanese Prime Minister's expense would not be forgotten and forgiven in Japan. We haven't heard much reaction since, but you know the Japanese aren't demonstrative in that way. They take quiet note. But then I was surprised to see a scathing piece in the Japan Times last week by a Japanese commentator suggesting that you were right, you know, certainly not forgotten or forgiven. What did you make of that, the strong language there, and what other signs have you picked up from Japan?
Well, once again, Andrew, that article that was in the Japan Times, I think it found its way into the Australian as well, shows that there are some Japanese out there who are actually quite concerned about the relationship and quite frankly want to point out just how troubled the relationship is. That's something that I pointed out on your show many times before. But I think what needs to happen here is that there is a need for Australians to understand that if we continue on like this, this social aikido that the Japanese play so well will come back to bite us. You can't make, gratuitous jokes about melons with references to the Prime Minister and then show up to a Spotify conference and then find your way into the Japanese media, which probably took the better part of 3 weeks to get in there. But the point is that now it is becoming more wide mainstream in Japan. And I think that also sends such a terrible message to Australian businesses trying to sort of do business with Japan.
And this, of course, comes amid Japan's concerns about Australia as a reliable supplier of the gas that it very desperately needs and ores as well. We haven't proven ourselves that reliable in the sense of wanting to increase taxes and royalties and blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. So this is a real issue. Given all that, should Foreign Minister Penny Wong have apologised either publicly or privately to the Japanese Prime Minister?
Well, to be honest, an apology really won't do anything as much as admit the guilt and to become even more mainstream than all it is. And I don't think it's necessarily a matter that Minister Wong should hide it. I think it just goes to show to the Japanese that once again, we have a government that does not seem serious about one of our largest and most important trading relationships. And we continue to do more and more of these, what I would call juvenile antics. And certainly I question the departmental advice for suggesting that he could substitute the Nara Treaty dinner for a Spotify event. But really, an apology from Minister Wong won't do anything. As I said, it's been absorbed, received, it has not been forgotten, and we really do have a long way back to win the trust and get back to what you were saying before about reliability and, most importantly, in critical minerals and oil and coal and gas, that of predictability. That's the most important thing that the Japanese want to hear from us.
Senai Takeichi, the Japanese Prime Minister, what kind of woman is she? Is she just going to, shrug it off? Oh, she can see the joke. Or is she someone that's a little bit more substantial than someone you can deride as the butt of a two melons joke?
She is a very resilient woman, I'll give you that much. She is pretty much the Maggie Thatcher of Japan, very much the Iron Lady of Japan. And look, she doesn't play up to the fact that she's a woman. She's just a very, very capable leader. She's still extremely popular in the polls, albeit she's had a mild come down from almost stratospheric heights. But she is someone who, we'll just quietly note that. Remember, she was the one that when Japan was very much dominated by male politicians, that she ended up staying back very late at night studying the legislation to make sure she was on top of that rather than frequent Ginza bars. That she was very much she's a stateswoman and she wants to keep that going forward. And I think she probably knows Japanese policy better than her own bureaucrats. So she will lock that away, but be sure she'll be even harder the next time she comes to negotiate. And we've done this to ourselves. And I think there is a really good opportunity. Perhaps we'll need a change of government to do it in order to restore the bilateral to the way it once was, which was a far better place than it's currently being left.
Mike Newman, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.
After the break, the One Nation ad that I think the Liberals could well learn from. Now, One Nation might be weak on policy right now, which is a worry, but no party is stronger on the way it messages. For instance, Labor right now is running the line that a vote for the Liberals is a vote for One Nation. Well, One Nation has given it right back to Labor with mustard, hot English, There's a by-election in West Australia at the end of the month, and this is what One Nation candidate Luke Herdigan has now put out, an ad that the Liberals should study to learn how to fight back and hard.
Labor is preferencing the Greens again. How can they justify that? The Greens' official immigration policy is to abolish the Department of Home Affairs and the Border Force. They want to reach net zero in 9 years. Say goodbye to every FIFO job in WA if that happens. They want to teach primary and secondary school kids about diverse sexualities and LGBT issues. 16 candidates in this by-election, but this is the party that Labor are asking you to preference. Really? Let's get rid of this woke nonsense and get back to common sense policy. Let's sink Labor in Secret Harbour.
Joining me is a perfect panel to discuss this. Gemma Tonini, communications consultant as well as journalist, and Caroline De Russo, commentator and president of the West Australian Liberals. Gemma, I mean, you know, it is a great point. A vote for the Greens is a vote for Labor, and a vote for Labor is a vote for the Greens. How dare they worry about, you know, Liberals preferencing One Nation?
I think there's a couple of things I want to point out about that ad and why it, in my view, it's terrific. First of all, it's so organic, it's so authentic. He's not particularly polished, but he's not super rough either. He speaks like you and I. He's speaking as an everyday person. You can imagine yourself having a beer with him, or in my case, a nice sparkling mineral water. The second thing is he references FIFO jobs. If you have spent more than 30 seconds in Western Australia or transited in and out of the Perth airport at any point in time, you will know that FIFO is the lifeblood of that state. So talking about FIFO jobs is absolutely genius for that campaign. And I think thirdly, the only thing I would observe is don't just call them Labor and the Greens, call them toxic Labor and the extremist Greens, because that's exactly what they are. So I don't like giving advice for free, Andrew, as you know, but I think this one gets a tick for me. It's authentic. It cuts where it's supposed to cut. But the whole thing about effective communication strategy is who are you talking to and what are you trying to say to them? He's speaking directly to his electorate in language they understand and on topics that are impacting to them.
Well, this is a bit orcs for you, Caroline. I mean, you've got a Liberal candidate in the field. Tell me how terrible that ad is.
No, I don't think the ad is terrible, but it's also not necessarily new. And I think the point that you make is really important, and it is important that Labor explains why they so closely work with and preference the Greens, and particularly in Western Australia, where the Greens hold the balance of power in the upper house, which is incredibly important. But this point was made back at the time of the 2025 state election, when we did preference One Nation above the Greens, and everyone got in a hot lather about it. And I just put out a statement straight away that said, well, if everyone has a problem with us preferencing the Greens, Labor first needs to explain why. If everyone has an issue with the Liberals preferencing One Nation, well, Labor is in government and they first need to explain why they are preferencing the Greens. And that story was dead on arrival and in the news cycle for less than 24 hours, which is absolutely what you need to do with those sorts of stupid allegations that Labor makes. But the point that is really important here, and Gemma's right, definitely about the FIFO jobs, but the single biggest issue in Secret Harbour is the Carnup train station, which Labor said that they would build 10 years ago, and it's only after the Libs said early on in the campaign that we would in fact build it that Labor quickly ran out last weekend, and there's some great footage there of the Premier, the Treasurer and the Labor candidate all running away from the media. It's really quite spectacular, where they have recommitted to that, and that there is actually the main issue down there. It's not immigration, because the state government can't fix immigration, and it's not necessarily gender-related issues. It is garden variety, economic, cost of living and transport issues. So the Liberals have done that. And he talks about common sense policy. Well, I'd love to see what that policy is.
Good. Apologies to the rest of Australia, but as long as the voters in that seat in West Australia heard that, this broadcast has been for good for Caroline. Hey, listen, Albanese's women problem, Gemma, a good-looking podcaster interviews Albanese and is off making unbelievably bad jokes about the breasts of Japan's Prime Minister. Yeah, And then you get a good-looking Spotify star, Amy Shark, at a Spotify function, and Albanese decides to snub a big dinner to mark a landmark friendship treaty with Japan. I mean, is there another way of explaining this?
Yeah, easy. I've never seen a bloke with more status anxiety in my life. Like, it's DJ Albo strikes again. He's the kid who never peaked in high school and has been spending the rest of his life making up. I wish I was joking, but I'm not. It is not the decision of a...
It's not
the decision of a serious leader.
No, but photos of the young Albo, he was pretty good looking, you know. You might not guess it from now, but he was all right.
I've seen them, I've got eyes, and I'm an objective judge. Hard pass.
Okay. Caroline, what do you make of it? It is really weird that he does two unbelievably stupid and crass snubs of Japan, and both the events involve, a young woman... I don't know whether it's like status anxiety, eager to impress. I don't know what it is, or just simply bad manners.
Or he's just crass and stupid, like you said. The fact of the matter is this bloke has never grown up. He has never grown up. He is an overgrown student activist who thinks something like that is more important than a very close, not only trading but also security strategic relationship with Japan. And after the whole melons incident, you would think that he would be on his best behaviour to try and do whatever he could to rectify that situation or make some improvement just something, Andrew. But instead of doing that, he's just poured kerosene over it and showed us all that he's just an immature child, and like Gemma said, with total status anxiety. I'm actually a bit embarrassed for him.
It's actually embarrassing. He's not a serious leader. He's not a serious person. He's not a serious leader. He goes to a Spotify party. I mean, is he 18?
I can't believe it. I know. But maybe, I don't know, a nice smorgasbord was made out for him. They're Swedish, you know. I don't know. I really don't know. By the way, I've got to show this. I mean, Russia, it's a war criminal regime now. I've lost all faith in the concept of Russian civilization, I've got to say. But, the sheer brutality of its leadership, the war criminal mindset, having a drone now chase a street vendor around his greengrocer's stand before trying to blow him up, injuring him. Remember, these drones have got first-person view, like there's a driver of the drone chasing a civilian around, blowing him up. Luckily, he wasn't killed, concussion, shrapnel wounds, etc. But what does this show, Gemma? What do you reckon it shows?
It shows a couple of things. It shows the absolute insanity of that conflict and how long it's been allowed to be drawn out for, and how the world just lets it go. It just lets it go as if it's like a constant reel in the background. Yep. And there are no Jews, and so there are no news. If this was there's no Netanyahu to blame, there is no Israel to hate. So this conflict, people just let it go. The United Nations just lets it go. There are no campaign protests. There's no boycotts. There's no free Ukraine. There's no any of that. It is absolutely evil and such a reflection of the global community's moral bankruptcy and abject failure to do anything other than serve themselves and feed the rise of anti-Semitism more broadly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gemma Tonini, Caroline de Russa. Thank you very much to you both. And for people saying, oh, yes, but a Ukrainian drone blew up several people on the beach in Russia over the weekend. Well, that was a drone that was intercepted by electronic warfare. They weren't hoping to blow up sand, right? That was just a mistake. This was deliberate. Gemma and Tonini said goodbye to her and to Caroline. So I'll say hello to Sherry Markson. But from me, good night.